Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie Quinn. I was a student of Betty Woodman's in 1992 and 1993. She was a wonderful mentor to me during those years and ever since. I now have her faculty line and her old phone number at the University of Colorado. In this remembrance, I hope to highlight Betty's gifts as a teacher. She's very well known as an artist, and she's been written about and exhibited and continues to be exhibited. I just got an email yesterday, I believe, for a solo exhibition of her work, which any of you who are on her mailing list knew, she was having a solo show seemingly every month. The first time I met Betty Woodman, she was wearing short socks that looked like watermelons, flesh and seeds on the shin, rind on the calf. She was very short, and she had a very good haircut. I was immediately curious about her. It was the first day of the new semester, and she started class by pronouncing, "Ceramics is the best material in the world." She spoke with absolute authority and conviction. Betty lived and breathed this conviction. She spoke about ceramics as the perfect marriage of painting and sculpture. Art was her religion, all of the arts, and she engaged in looking at, listening to, and touching all of it. She was always playing opera in her studio, and I remember her once comparing the spout of a teapot to a lovely gesture by the ballerina Margot Fontaine. During critiques, her hands were never still. She was always touching the pieces on the table. She used her senses with amazing precision. And for her, ceramics was the crown jewel in all of the arts, the one that allowed touch and taste and sight and sound. She showed this to us. During the first month of class, I was working in the studio on a Saturday morning. She had a commission for a public art piece at the new Denver airport, and she had devoted her school studio to the project. She came in early that morning to work on her commission, entering through the outside doors about 50 feet away from my table. Just as she came in, she looked over at me and said, "That's not the way to apply glaze. You need a different brush." How could she even see what brush I was using from that distance? She came over and talked to me about how glaze was different from paint, how you needed to lay the material down, not scrub at it. I've never forgotten her demonstration. She was so clear about how to use materials and tools, and she could so efficiently show us through her confidence. The week before our first project was due, we were all working like mad. We were discussing the critique format, and she said, "Wouldn't it be nice to have a breakfast potluck the day of the critique?" We all agreed that it would. "So you can all make new breakfast sets by next Tuesday then?" As I recall, they were 8-piece breakfast sets. We all agreed that we could, even though I was already thinking that the schedule was impossible. But we did it. She brought everyone along to her high standards of working, and she simply expected us to keep up. Liz Quackenbush remembers that her assignments were like nothing we had ever seen before. They outlined the way Betty approached her own work. Betty took each part of a pot and separated it out: foot, handle, neck, rim, volume, etc. Then, under each, she had listed 2, 3, wider than the rim, twice the size of the belly, multiple volumes, stacked sections, side-by-side volumes, 2, 3 more, and on and on. The assignment was to invent forms with this multiple-choice approach to imagining what an assemblage of thrown forms could be. The work it generated was out of this world, unimaginable, and fantastic. Here I will start to show slides of some of the work of Betty's students. This is Liz again speaking. Often the students who excelled were not great at craft, but it highlighted imagination. I remember working so hard to make Betty see that I was creative. So many of us worked our tails off to get her approval. Deborah Dell, another student of Betty's, remembers a class with Betty in 1982. She demonstrated how to make one of her throne slabs. The table was too high for her, so she climbed up on a stool and directly onto the table. I thought it was hilarious to watch her stretching her piece on top of the table, and I loved that can-do, no-nonsense approach to teaching and working with clay. I also loved watching her touch the clay. She was so loose and spontaneous with it. She did not fuss. I remember asking her once about an edge on a piece that looked sharp to me. I asked her if it bothered her, and she said, "No. Does it bother you?" She had total confidence in what she was doing. That was incredible to witness as a student. Betty taught us so well through allowing us to witness her practice. Every year, Betty and George divided up the year between New York in the fall, Italy in the summer, and Boulder in the spring. My second year as a student in Boulder, it was January, and she had just arrived back in Colorado. Somehow she was not distracted at all by unpacking and settling in. She simply got to work, as she always did. 2 weeks in, Betty invited our class to her studio. She had 10 gigantic pieces on tables around the room in various stages, 2 weeks after arriving. She was showing us what was possible. She made us each ask a question about her work. I can't remember what I asked, but I loved the invitation. She was excited about finding a way to draw with pencil, then brush over the drawing with terra sigillata. The pencil created a resist. She was frustrated at the weight of the pots collapsing the bases she had made. Her colleague, Scott Chamberlain, suggested that she create a second foot under the main weight of the vases, and it was working. She positioned herself as one of us, someone who had technical problems and someone excited about her material discoveries, someone who worked in the studio. She brought us over to her house and studio because she wanted to have a conversation about her work with people who would understand. At the same time, she showed us that this was a practice to be taken very seriously. While most of our class had been poking around, she got right to work. She showed us the evidence. I remember thinking that I needed to up my game. Her acuity of observation and thinking, her outlandish imagination, her ability to be inspired by architecture and music, she gave us this. Because she was constantly laying this ground, she could say something as simple as scale, material, surface, and really got us to think hard simply because we wanted to examine these questions to her standard. A few years ago, I was with a small gathering of ceramicists. Someone asked me about Betty Woodman. Hadn't I studied with her? Yes, I said. Betty was my ceramics mom. It just came out. I had never said that before or even thought it, but it immediately felt true. Someone else in the group said, I think she was a lot of people's ceramics mom, and I felt the truth of that as well. She gave us advice. She showed us how things were done. She talked to us as if our questions mattered. We rebelled. We kept turning her words over in our minds and looking at what she did. She nurtured us, and she showed us how to work. This is Betty last summer at her studio in Antella, Italy. She had 6 solo shows in the last year of her life. We are grateful for our time with her and grateful for all of the work that she left for us. She taught us that ceramics was the best material in the world, and she will be teaching us all for a long time to come. Thank you.